I'm Julie Keys. This is Ginger Wilson. Like I was saying, you guys are very lucky to have Ginger here tonight because she is about to retire after what, 3 decades?
Not quite,
Okay,
but 23
very
years.
close, very close.
Yeah.
So, and Ginger knows everything. Any question you have, I guarantee you'll be able to at least attempt to answer it. So,
try.
I'm going to. It sounds like we have a. Well, let me first start with disability. Who's disability rights and why are we here?
Yeah, maybe we can find out how many of you are aware of Disability Rights Ohio. You familiar with us?
Oh,
a little bit.
Okay, I'm glad we're here.
So we just want to spend 2 minutes explaining. We are a nonprofit, but we get federal money to help people with disabilities, and so our services are free. You have to have a disability. We do have annual goals that we pick, so we're not going to take every single case of everyone that calls, but we do try to share information. So I really highly recommend if you have questions or you want to, if you need help, give us a call. At the very least, we'll kind of put you in the right direction, hopefully. And we do a lot of waiver cases. We do a lot of DD eligibility cases. Julie and I are on the Civil Rights and Access team. Huge part of our work is Medicaid stuff. We also do housing discrimination kind of things. We do, oh gosh, I always forget.
What do we not do?
There's a lot.
It's a lot. Questions. What do we not do?
A lot of public accommodations. People need reasonable accommodations at stores or businesses or doctors or whatever. So we do a lot. But, you know, obviously we can't take on and be attorneys for every single person who calls us. But we do always try to give people, get them in the right direction, tell them kind of what they need to look at, what information they need to take the next step. So I highly recommend that you, and I don't even think we have our phone number on here. That sucks. Sorry. I don't know why we don't have it on there.
Slides, but we don't have our contact information. We'll make sure we share it.
We will. We'll definitely get that to you. And we have a good website as well. And I highly recommend you take a look at it. We've got information on waivers. We've got information on some of the things you'll see linked in here. It is 60 pages because I give you links. I try to give a lot of information so that people can use this later. I am not going to read. Neither of us are going to read 60 slides. But I do want people to have the information they need. So that's why we try to be a little comprehensive when we're doing this, because we want people to be able to go back, hit those links, and if it's a particular issue that they have. So I recommend you give us a call. We take, our team alone did about 500 cases last year, and those are actually working with people. So I think we can be very helpful. We have good outcomes sometimes. Sometimes, you know, I can only do what I can do. The law is what it is, but we do definitely try to help people along this process. Someone said it's very confusing. It is very confusing. I mean, it's confusing. And I will tell you even today, and Julie will tell you, there are some changes coming too with DODD. And we don't even know how all that's going to work. So I won't be able to talk too much about that. I can tell you it's coming. I've been here 23 years. They change it every 5 years and making me crazy. Change the rules, change processes. So, you know, just have to kind of roll with it, ask a lot of questions, and acknowledge, you know, and recognize that we're a resource for you. So please do contact our agency if you have questions. Okay, so I'm going to let Julie go ahead. We're going to talk about DD eligibility first, because that's the first step in getting any waivers and getting services through the county DD boards. And then we'll roll into waivers, and I'll talk about that as we go on.
Okay, for the folks who are already like involved and engaged in this system, the parts that I'm covering are going to be like very basic. So I will try to go through it quickly. Again, if we're going too fast, you are getting these slides, and if we gloss over something, there are usually resources attached that you can dive into further. But as Ginger mentioned, eligibility is sort of very important, as it's at the root of all of this. So it's very important that we cover it. Every county has a county board of DD, which is great and important. As long as you have a developmental disability, you will be provided services, whether you're a child or an adult. And to access those services, you have to meet, you know, basic eligibility standards. So in order to be eligible for County Board of DD services, you must live in the county in which you are applying for services. That's the base level eligibility standard. You must have a qualifying developmental disability. Having a diagnosis of mental illness alone will not suffice. And we'll go over some of those developmental disabilities on another page. developmental disability needs to manifest before age 22, and it needs to be likely to continue indefinitely. In other words, it's not a temporary condition.
Let me jump in real quick. And this is
I
important.
encourage you to jump in. You need to suck all the knowledge out of Ginger before she leaves.
It's important. You do not have to have a diagnosis, a qualifying diagnosis before age 22, but you do have to have the disability. So it sounds silly, but lots of people with autism may not get diagnosed until after 22. So as long as you have autism before age 22 and you can show that you had it, you manifest it, then you're not, you don't have to have had the diagnosis before age 22. And that's really becomes important. We do get sometimes there's a problem with that. So, that's an issue. So it is in the rules specifically. You ultimately have to have the diagnosis eventually, but you don't have to necessarily have it before age 22. And it's just an important eligibility thing to keep in mind. We get adults with, 50-year-olds that move from another country or move from another state. And they have a very hard time showing they had it before age 22 because do you have your school records? I don't. No. And so, having that information that you can prove that you had it before age 22, which is why you're all wonderful and you do this when your children are little, and then you'll have those records you need. So anyway, sorry.
No, thanks for clarifying that. And that's why manifest is there in quotes. It is a term of art and can't avoid that. So, and then additionally, you need to meet the requirements depending on the age group that you have, that you can show that you have some sort of substantial functional limitation in different areas. So these are some of those disabilities we talked about. Acceptable diagnoses include things like ADD, ADHD, autism, Down syndrome, intellectual disabilities. Go to the next page. There's a long list. You can see it's a long list. Spina bifida, Tourette's, TBIs. So yes, long list of diagnoses that would make you eligible. So eligibility is going to differ depending on the age group. For children who are under 3, if your child has been diagnosed with DD or there is a suspected DD under the age of 3, you might be eligible for early intervention services through the DD. There's also other resources available if this is something that applies to you. Children with medical handicaps offers additional resources that might be helpful. And again, we've linked to both of these. So if it's applicable, you can go back and look at it. So eligibility for 3 to 5-year-olds is going to use a different standard for this age group. So they're going to verify a diagnosis, assess whether there are substantial developmental delays or if there's a congenital or acquired condition, and then determine if the delay or the condition is likely to lead to a substantial functional limitation in any of the functional areas. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah. This is. I always told her I'm going to jump in.
I'm prepared.
Just be prepared for it. For this, and the reason is children 3 to 5 may not have a diagnosis yet. But it's obvious that they're not meeting developmental milestones, so they don't need to have the diagnosis, but they do need to have something from a doctor to say, hey, we see these developmental delays. They can still get services at this time. Obviously, early intervention is extremely important for kids that have developmental disabilities. So that's why there is a little bit of difference in that. So.
And also just a strong encouragement if you suspect that your child has a developmental disability in this age range, you should contact the school district. So probably the earlier the better you contact your school district.
There's a lot of agencies that get together and have early intervention. You may have already experienced some of that. The Department of Health, DD boards, other places, they all kind of share that responsibility. But the school district is required at age 3 to evaluate children, see if they're a child with a disability. And that you can get services, even if the child doesn't go to school, you can get services in the school district can provide, like preschool programs, therapeutic kinds of ones. So, I always, some people don't know that. You don't always know that you can go to your school district and have them evaluate your child if you suspect a disability.
Okay, so now moving on to children age 6 through adulthood, they must also have substantial functional limitations in at least 3 of the following areas. So mobility, walking or maneuvering, self-care, things like toileting, showering, grooming, self-direction? Are they able to make, do they have sound judgment, make decisions for themselves? Capacity for independent living, can they help with household tasks? Are they able to do things around like laundry? Economic self-sufficiency, this will be assessed at an age appropriate level. So, can they manage their money? Learning, are, basic learning skills developed? Where are they academically? And then receptive and expressive language, are they understanding language in their primary language? Okay, we've also linked to the assessment. So the COEDI is what is provided for children ages 6 through 15, and the OEDI is what is provided for, I want to call them kids, people who are 16 and older. And we link to it because if you are preparing for an assessment, I think it's very helpful to review what it's going to look like, what questions are going to be asked, what assessments are going to look like. So strongly encourage you to take a look at that.
And one thing I will say, and I say this to everyone, as you're talking, we like to all say all the wonderful things our kids with disabilities can do. This is not the time to do that. This is the time to talk about their limitations. It's very hard. I feel bad for the kids, but you've got to say it like it is. So if they're like, can they dress themselves? Well, they might be physically able to put their clothes on, but you might have to tell them and remind them, and they might be wearing summer clothes in the winter. And so when you're doing these assessments, don't just quickly answer the questions because they'll be like, okay, great, he can do it. And that works against you in services. So you want to stop and think, does it take them a whole lot of time? Do they do a really bad job in dressing themselves? Do they wear themselves out?
All the articles of clothing?
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
Right, right. So when you're doing these assessments, why I always say look at it. And we also linked on the next slide some guidance that DODD, the State Department of DD, uses, and it gives examples about what they should be looking for. So it's really careful. I always tell people, be really careful when you answer these questions. Think about it. Yeah, he can do it, because we all want to go, yeah, of course he can do that. But he may not be able to do it without a whole lot of help. And his parents, I have a kid with disability, so I know this very intimately myself. We do it for them. We just get tired and we just do it. Mm-hmm. So you really need to think when you're answering these questions about, can they do it independently? Do they need a whole lot of help? And so if you don't do it when you take the assessment, you might have to do it when you get a denial, because it's really important to make sure that you're giving them accurate information so they can make a good decision what limitations they have. And it's hard sometimes. And I feel bad for some of the kids. I mean, it's hard for the kids themselves, usually. And I usually talk with them and tell them, look, I know this is bad, but we want to make sure you get all the help you can get. And, I try to explain it to them, but it is very hard, especially the older children. But they won't all be listening, little ones, but 15, they will want that person there, I think, to ask the question. And a lot of times people ask the person, they'll be like, oh, yeah, I could do that. And you're the parent going, yeah, but no. And it's hard. It's very hard, but you have to do it. Otherwise, it'll just look like your child can do everything. And that's not true, if it isn't, obviously. So you want to be really thoughtful with those questions.
Okay, like Ginger said, these are user guides that we would encourage you to review before doing an assessment. So the next, well, we're going to talk about a lot of issues that we see in our office. But what do you do if the county board denies eligibility after you've done the assessment? I know at least one person in the room said that was an issue. You can appeal. You can appeal a denial. A timeline will apply. So make sure you note that. That'll be important. But you have a right to be told by someone why it was denied. You have a right to have an attorney assist you in the appeal. You have a right to question county board staff, examine the records, including their notes, and the form that was used. So, and then you also have the right to offer additional documentation to support an eligibility claim.
So some county boards are not very good at telling you why they're denying you. They'll go, you only have 2 limitations, and they don't necessarily even tell you what those are in. So I highly recommend people get all the documents, get the answer sheets that they filled out in order to make the determination. Ask for copies of any notes, whoever did the assessment. You will find little things that will be helpful to you, because sometimes you may tell them they can't do this, and It doesn't get written
Yeah,
down. It
that
doesn't
happens a
get
lot.
recorded. And so going through that answer sheet allows you to see where they made their mistake, and then you can correct it by adding some additional information, giving examples. So a lot of what we do when we get these denials, we will go back and we'll be like, okay, let's look at the sheet. What did they say they could do? Is that true in your experience? And they'll be like, yeah, but no, they can't do this and that. Did you tell them that? Maybe they did. So what we do is help people write out a page that basically takes everything that they disagree with and gives examples.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, he can cook, but he almost burned the house down once because he forgot to turn the stove on. Not that we want that to happen, but those are things you want to write down. Anything like,
Yes.
yeah, they can cross the street, but they don't look for cars and they almost got hit, 3 times. These are important things that you might not think of when you're doing the assessment, but you want to put it in writing. And that's the other thing. The county board is going to listen to you and take what they're going to do. You need to put it in writing. So we often have people ask for reconsideration. We have more information for you, county board. We want you to look at this again. Here's some examples. These are the areas we think you made a mistake, and here's examples of all the behaviors. We had to call the police because he ran off and eloped or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things you need to put in writing, and I put it right smack in those categories, so they have to reconsider it. And then if you still get denied, you can take it to the next level, and you have some documentation that you told them that, and that these are things they should have considered. So.
Okay, so what kind of services can the County Board of DD provide if someone is found eligible? Those are things like assessments focused on determining functional limitations, service planning, coordination, oversight and assistance with agencies that provide these services, Medicaid funded home and community-based waivers that Ginger is going to dive into in a little bit. Additional services that DD boards can help you access, things like respite care. I heard that come up. Family resources funds, vocational training, adult day programs, behavioral support, residential support, early intervention services, DD Medicaid waivers is the big one. So obviously, very, very important if you have a kiddo that's eligible and denied, that you should. Okay, so we kind of included some of the top issues that we see come through in our office. Client being told that they wouldn't be found eligible even if they did the assessment. That's pretty common. Don't even bother. You won't be eligible. If this happens, and can't think of a situation where we wouldn't suggest you put something in writing, but it's very important to request in writing asking for an assessment. And provide the following documentation if you can. Documentation about the developmental disability, what the client's limitations are, and then why it's necessary, not just beneficial, but why it's necessary that they have services.
When you're asking a board to assess, you have to give them information.
Yeah.
You don't just want to go here, just assess them on your own. You want to make sure that you give them the diagnosis. I mean, they can get it, but it's really, the more you can give them in advance, the better you're going to be. So give them all the information that you have. Kind of like we were talking about the denials, I'd say make a list of all the stuff the reason you think that your child needs these services. They elope. They do all of these things. They have all kinds of difficulties, and any limitations that you can acknowledge and put together, you can grab it from school records. Whichever, or your own information. You're the parents. These children, so I have no problem with you going 1, 2, 3. Here's what we have to deal with all the time. Any information you can give the county board is going to help from the get-go to make that process easier for you. They can still contact your doctor, your child's doctors and things in schools, and they may, but more information you can give them, the better.
Yeah, you're going to be doing a lot of the work. Okay, next issue we see a lot is the county board is not providing ADA required effective communication. This happens all the time, and it's such a shame because if there were ever an entity to understand ADA accommodations, you would think it would be the county board. But we see it all the time, documents not being provided in the family's or the individual's language. Got a case of that right now. Not providing documents in Braille, not providing interpreters when needed. and just not providing reasonable accommodations in general. We always, always, always suggest that you put reasonable accommodations in writing. And if you have a doctor's letter that supports why you need that specific accommodation, that's like the gold standard. So,
yeah. And this is for the parent too. Like if you have
yes.
a different language, or you know, they need an interpreter so they can participate in these meetings and assessments effectively, then they need to provide that.
Yes.
Most county boards are a little better in the last few years. They've gotten some funding, so now they realize they have to do it. And so we're seeing a little bit improvement there. But Braille's always a hard one. But whatever they need to do to enable the parent and the client to be able to participate in this process, they need to provide that to accommodate them. Medicaid state hearing is the next bingo.
Okay, so next issue that we see a lot, county boards using more restrictive criteria to exclude eligibility. It's what Ginger was kind of touching upon. It is really difficult for parents to talk about their child's limitations. That's one of the things we probably counsel our clients' parents about the most, or guardians. And, you know, just making sure you're providing the full context, the full picture, not just the example that's up here is, you know, can you walk around your neighborhood? And a person might be able to walk, but, you know, can they walk far distances? Can they, do they get worn out even after a short walk? Are they safe, you know, crossing the street? Can they cross the street in time? So lots of details.
And that's where those guidance documents come in handy, because they talk about and give you examples of these kinds of things that you should consider. So, you know, walking isn't just can you walk, it's can you maneuver around your neighborhood?
Yes.
Whatever that means. So, but it could very well mean you can't walk out in the middle of the street without getting hit or something like that.
Are you safe walking in your neighborhood?
So I highly recommend you take a look at those before you do the assessments. It'll give you much better sense of how you should be thinking when you're answering these questions.
Exactly.
Okay, this one is bingo, where it's LOC, and that is level of care.
Okay, so strategies for addressing an eligibility denial. You will want to get all the records. You are entitled to that. So ask your county board for all the records regarding the eligibility. Put that request in writing. You know, ask for the answer sheet for the co-ed or the OED. And then do your legwork too, gathering documentation from doctors, other professionals, school, OOD, anything that you will want to update the county board with. So provide that updated documentation for inclusion in the assessment. That's also important if you appeal, because you cannot add documents after that stage.
You can try, but
you can try. You can ask nicely.
Sometimes you get them in, sometimes
not. So we've kind of touched on this, so I'll breeze through it, but review that assessment sheet, identify areas where you think they were wrong, and you add, you know, your input on, you know, why you believe there are significant limitations.
I will tell you, most parents are very surprised when they see the answer sheet. They're like, I didn't say that. And they may have said it, or they may have said a whole bunch more and it never got transferred.
Yes,
it's hard to get a waiver. Do a lot of people get denied? Yes, a lot of people get denied. I will tell you, a lot of the issues we've seen in the last probably 10 years is very much tightening up of eligibility, very much screening, because there's a lot more people trying to get eligible for services. So they're really tightening it up. So we get a lot of denials for eligibility that before, maybe 15 years ago, you wouldn't have, but we're definitely seeing that. And the waivers, there are not enough waivers for everyone who needs it. So, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So now they have a waiting list, which we had one before, but I'll talk about that too. But so, you know, it is hard. I mean, they are trying to pick the people that have the most significant needs. But I still encourage people to do that, because, you know, there are lots of people with significant needs. So you have to go through the process. You might get denied. I've had people that have gotten denied a couple times, and we've kind of come back to the table with more documentation, and then they've gotten it. So it really, you know, I encourage you to keep at it. Don't just say, well, forget it, then I can't, because it does happen and people do get denied. But there are ways you can kind of gather information and share it that makes it a little bit easier to get that. So
yeah, I feel like we touched on that already.
Okay,
So okay, I feel like did we touch on this?
Probably a lot of it.
We probably touched on a lot of it.
I have been a little repetitive.
No, you're good. It's better to be repetitive, and you guys can come back and review these if you need it. So again, ask the county board for a reconsideration in light of the additional information and documentation. Ask for another assessment with the new information, and then go through the county board of DD's complaint and appeals process.
Yeah. So eligibility, you file a complaint or appeal through the county board. It's a process. They just changed it.
Yeah.
So I have the new rule there. It's pretty much the same. There are a few little changes, but they should give it to you and tell you what the process is. But you've got to definitely go through your SSA supervisor, which is like a case manager, and then tell them you want to appeal it. You can ask for reconsideration. They have something called a county conference, which is like an informal.
Yeah.
Hey, we think you made a mistake. Here's 18 more documents you should take a look at. And sometimes that will resolve it. Sometimes it will not. But there are processes. You do want to be careful about the timelines, though, because you don't want to miss your appeal. You can always ask again. That's a good thing about county board things. You can always get some more data and take it in and ask again. But definitely watch the timelines on that.
Yes, watch the timelines. 90 days and more links.
And the reason the links are new, and you really do have to take a look at them. They kind of lay out the process. Not complicated, but it is a little bit.
It is complicated.
A little bit.
It's not. And again, we're always a resource should you have questions.
I have a virtual question. That was from a few minutes ago, but it's
worth go back.
So, Kelsey S., can they deny based on parent income?
Deny what?
A waiver.
No, they should not. And the reason I say that, children with disabilities can get Medicaid. When they get a waiver, they'll get Medicaid, even if their parents make too much to be eligible financially for Medicaid. Part of the waiver is that they waive that financial for parents. However, you still have to consider if the child's rich, then they may not get a waiver. They may not get Medicaid. May not be able to, but waivers are kind of set aside for people with disabilities. So they kind of waive the family income for getting Medicaid. So, and it's not uncommon at all, but it is a good way to get Medicaid for your child if they're not, if your family's not eligible because you make too much money. Once they hit 18, then they only go on the income of the person. They do try to come back and get the family. It's everyone's complicated. They honestly, even Medicaid.
They try everything.
They start and they're like, I don't know. And they're like, I have a waiver. And they're like, oh, all right, never mind. So it is a little complicated, but the good thing is if you get a waiver, if your child gets a waiver, even if you're not eligible for Medicaid as a family, that child will get Medicaid. And there's really good things about Medicaid that you want. I will talk a little bit later about, but because there are services you can get through straight Medicaid that can also help your child if you don't get a waiver. So we'll talk about that.
I think that wraps up.
Okay, can you do this for me? Because I can't do more than
one thing.
I
would love to. Okay.
Okay, so you've gotten eligibility for services through DD. Then the team, and so you'll get a team, they'll determine what services the county board is going to offer your child. I say child, adults can do it as well. But you're all, I think, here for children, so I'm just going to use the word child. So they create what's called an individual service plan. This is a plan that says, hey, we're going to give this person these services. We have it, teams figure out what they need. Here's what we're going to offer. There are oftentimes kind of conflicts about that. So you may not think they're giving enough to your child. They may give them a little bit of services and you're like, oh no, they need all these other things. So you can challenge that, because once we get into, you can challenge that a little bit. So they have an individual service plan. You're part of the team. If you disagree with that, you can go through the process. If you think that your child needs more services than what the county board's offering you just generally, that's when you can ask for a waiver assessment. And a waiver is extra services that helps a person, but a child, be able to live in the community and maintain their health and safety and get what they need so they don't become institutionalized. That's really what the bottom line reason for waivers are, is that people don't, all end up institutional care because they need to. You can go to the next one.
Sorry.
So again, each county board of DD oversees the waivers in their county. So you do have to go through them. You can ask them for what's called a waiting list assessment. And that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get on a waiting list, but basically you say, my child needs a waiver, I want a waiver. Once they say no, then that becomes a Medicaid issue, that you have been denied a Medicaid service. And that goes not through the county board process, but goes through a state hearing process. So that gives you someone outside to take a look at that to see, whether they've followed the rules and whether your child should be eligible for a waiver.
Next slide.
Yep.
Okay.
So what happens if someone who's trying to get Medicaid gets denied?
Well, try to get
A waiver. Okay.
waivers.
Okay. So when you are denied a Medicaid service of any kind, if you are Medicaid and you're denied, you have a right to a state hearing. That's called due process. So Medicaid will set up, and through Job and Family Services, they have a state hearing bureau, and they do all the state hearings. And what they're looking at that level is the rules. So they're looking at, okay, what are the rules? Did they follow the rules? If they didn't follow the rules, so you have a process that you can go and prove that they did something wrong. They should have given it to them, whatever, and you can give more information to the hearing officer. So, and the good thing about that, it's not just the county board deciding it by themselves in that system. It's kind of outside of it, so theoretically it's more objective. But they're all looking at the rules and saying, does this fit within the rules? So the one thing I did want to say is that the reason it's really good to have Medicaid, even if if your child gets a waiver and they get Medicaid has they have a couple things that are really helpful to children with disabilities. They have a thing called health check. If you're not familiar with it, it's actually called early periodic screening and diagnostic treatment.
Okay.
And it is called that in the Medicaid rules, which is crazy. But we call it health check in Ohio, and it's kind of a preventative care. But the good thing about it, it's not just preventative care for just getting your shots and checkups. It actually has diagnostics and treatment as part of its requirements. So for children on Medicaid, they, if you have Medicaid, they have all these rules. You get 2 things of speech and 1 thing of this and 1 thing of that or whatever. For children, they get what they need in order to correct or ameliorate their conditions. It's a nice little broad language, and for years, Ohio didn't do any of it. We actually sued them and said, hey, you're really supposed to do this. Every state is required to have health check or EPSCT, and it's really important because it helps you be able to argue that Medicaid just can't ignore some need that a child has that has a disability, because they have to be able to correct and ameliorate their condition. And the good thing about that is that it allows you anything Medicaid can cover, that even if Ohio doesn't cover it, they can get it if they're a child. So I had an example, a kid needed a special kind of walker, and Medicaid is like, this is our list. That's all they get. It's not on there. That kind of walker's not on here. But because it was a child, he got it because he has to, because whatever they have to do to correct or ameliorate their condition. It's weird language, but it is very helpful. So it's really important to keep that in your mind. And especially if you're doing a state hearing, you want to always mention health check, because it's really important. It will sometimes turn the tide on a hearing. The other thing is obviously Medicaid has services that are home health services. And we've had some children that do not get on a waiver, but they've been able to get home health. It's not exactly the same as you might get on a waiver, but some people have had people coming in the home providing services for people in the home for up to 50 hours a week, even with that service, only up till age 21. But it is a kind of a backup that if you can't get a waiver or you're on the wait list, you can also, if your child has Medicaid, they have to have it. But if they have Medicaid, they can go and the doctor just has to say it's medically necessary for the child, and they can get those services. So those are 2 really important things if a child has Medicaid. These are all Medicaid waivers we're talking about. Medicaid has waivers for DD. They have waivers for old people. They have waivers for different people with mental health issues. So there are a lot of they're called home and community-based waivers. And they're different, and they all have different rules and different. So there are three DD waivers. In order to get a DD waiver or a DD waiver, you have to have what's called DD level care. Luckily, it's almost exactly what Julie was talking about. You have to have it, you have to have the condition before age 22. It has to be something that's going to be indefinite. It's not going to go away. You have the qualifying condition. It's something you need services for. So it's pretty similar. And so you still have to have those 3 substantial functional limitations. So once you've hit the eligibility, you've kind of already done some of that. Then the question becomes as how serious is it? Do you need a waiver? And waivers are truly very helpful to people. because it allows people to be in the community, and when they might end up being institutionalized if they didn't have those services in their home. So 3 waivers: IO waiver, which is individual options. This is the one everyone wants. It's the highest level one. It's based on the person's need. They have to do an assessment, say what level of service does this person need. If you, it doesn't have a cap on it. I mean, it kind of does, but if a child, I will tell you, my son has a waiver, had one for years. He has autism and he has a lot of behaviors, so he's always over. When he was younger, always over the amount they gave him. And you can get what's called prior auth. If someone has an IO waiver and they have additional services that are medically necessary, you can go to DODD and the county board can and ask for them. Hey, he needs this now. He needs 2-on-1. He needs whatever. As long as it's a waiver service, they'll decide whether they get it. So IO waiver is the gold standard. Everybody wants it. You can get a lot of services with it. It really depends on the person's need, though. I mean, IO waiver, you don't just get a set amount. You get whatever that person needs. And then if it's not enough, they can go to prior auth, and you can also ask the county board to go to prior auth and ask for things. I mean, you might get denied, but you definitely have a better chance. Second waiver is called level 1 waiver. It used to be $8,000. It is now actually 40 some thousand for children and 60 some thousand in services for adults. Sounds like a lot. It's not really when you think about it. It doesn't. Services are expensive, but it does provide a lot of services. If you want to go through, the last one's a self waiver, and I'll tell you about that. I'm not fond of self waiver, so I'll have a scowl on my face when I talk about it. But if it's all you can get, take it and go with it. But IO waiver, I'm not going to read all these, but there are lots of things you can get with the waiver. The whole point of waivers is you sometimes get things you couldn't get in Medicaid. So you can get like home modifications if somebody needs to have the doors widened, or we've had clients get, ramps to get in their house and different things. You can get vocational services. You can get home delivered meals if that's what someone needs. On IO waiver, you can get nursing. You can get homemaker personal care services, which is what most people want, is someone to come in the house and, make sure the child doesn't run out of the house and, run in the street and all of those things. There's a lot of things on here you can get. Doesn't mean you're going to get everything. The team will decide what your person needs. And you may disagree with the county board, but that there's a big amount of services that are available under a waiver. So IO waiver, everyone's wants one. And again, we talked about individual service plans. So when you get a waiver, you get assessed to see what your level of care needs are, and then you get a plan. And the plan, some people, if they disagree with the plan, don't want to sign it. I tell you, you need to sign it, because if you don't sign it, you will not get any services for your child. You can sign with disagreement. So you can sign and go, yes, I agree with all of this. He needs this, but I don't like this. And then you can go to state hearing if you need to. Okay.
Next.
Yep. Level 1, same kinds of services. A little bit, it has a limitation, has a cap on it, which is different, but lots of services. I mean, truly, when I started, this was 8,000 was all you got with the level 1. So it has greatly improved, because there was a need, and you can get assistive technology. There's a lot of different things you can get with these waivers.
Oh, sorry, if I went too
Go
far.
ahead. Nope.
Okay.
Self waiver. The only reason I'm griping about it is it's an odd one. Some people really like it because it's called participant directed services. So you kind of think you can, hire your people, pay them what you want, and get other services. Some people get like YMCA memberships, so the person has exercise, and you still have to get approval. And so it's still a problem sometimes to get approval for the things that you want. But some people have worked very well with them. I just find them kind of odd. You have to have somebody like a broker who, either a county board or somebody that's paid to decide, and you have to hire people and you have to fire them, and so it puts a lot of responsibility on the parents, and sometimes can be very hard to get what they actually want, because county boards are going, nope, he doesn't need that, and we do get a fair amount of calls about that. But it's services that if you don't have anything else and you can use it and you can work with it, you can definitely get, and it's up to 60,000 for adults, and children 41,000. So self waiver has similar kinds of things. I will tell you, for the level 1 and the self waiver, you're not going to get nursing. Probably you can get nursing through Medicaid if you need it. It's hard, and there's shortages. But for this, county boards, their providers do delegated nursing. So unless it's something a nurse has to do, you can get some of that on the waiver. But okay, so the question is, does everybody get denied, or does everyone get one? No, they do not all get one. There are so much need. So It used to be a first come, first serve waiting list. So we had a waiting list that just anybody was put on it. My son got on at age 4. He didn't get his waiver until 20. So if that gives you a clue how he did get it, but not that one. It was not workable. Let's put it that way. It was kind of crazy. And people, depending on where you live, you didn't get them. So they made a new system. I'm not so fond of it even still, but it's a system. So now they have a new waiting list process. And I gave you the rules so you can kind of see what it is, but you can go ahead. And again, if you don't feel that what their county board's offering, you can ask for a waiting list assessment. And that just means, can we get a waiver? Does he need a waiver right now? So go ahead. So with the waiting list assessment, what they're looking at is they're only answering these 2 questions. Does the person have an immediate unmet need? And that means something that requires them to get services in the next 30 days or something bad's going to happen. And that does happen. And then the other thing is it a current unmet need? And that's something that you would need services in a year. So if you have an elderly parent who's taking care of someone, but they're starting to have problems and you might lose them, they're not going to be able to do it, that might be something that could be considered a current need. With the new system for the waiting list, it's very odd, but if you have an immediate need, the county board has to do something. They have to offer you something because you can't just say no. What they offer you might not like. It might not be what you need. It could be a waiver or it could not be a waiver. It could be something else they're offering you. And if you don't agree with it, then you would have to go to a hearing and say, no, that's not going to meet the need. Current need, if they have a current need and they don't have any waivers that they can give you or they don't want to give you one, then you can go on the waiting list. And it sounds like when you're on the waiting list that after 12 months, you're going to get a waiver. No, that's not true. You might get a waiver, but we've had people that have been on the current need and the waiting list for 2 years and still not getting a waiver. So it's not guaranteed that you get a waiver if you get on the waiting list, but you could. And you can always ask to be reassessed. So as you're going along, you're on the waiting list and something else happens, your kid hits adolescence and all heck breaks loose, then you can say, hey, county board, we've got to reassess him to see if he meets immediate need. So you can do that. So what oftentimes we're getting a lot of, there's another category. So they're saying, no, you don't have a current need, or they might be saying you have a need, but we're not going to give you a waiver. There's some services out in the community you can get, and we're going to tell you about them. And then, yay, you don't need a waiver. Most people are like, no, but they can do that. And so, and that's part of the process. And we are getting a lot of calls from people who are going, yes, they have a need, but it's met by community resources. Mm-hmm. You have to go to a higher rise and get services through them, or you have to, go do this. We've had one that you go look for an ICF. I'm like, first of all, ICFs are not waiver services. ICF is an intermediate care facility, institutional care. It can be in the community, but it's institutional care. It's the opposite of a waiver. So, yeah. But we have some county boards that are saying that's what you get to do. Yay. I like those because those are easy to knock down. But I'm like, yes, that's so wrong. We're not going to do that. And we can usually get those resolved. But they will say community resources, they are required to give you services that are real, that are available. So they can give you a whole list, but you call and they're like, no, we don't have that. No, we don't have that. That's not legit. And you go back and you say, no, I tried this. It's not that. They're getting a little creative. They're kind of like, you need to go get a private foundation grant. I'm like, what? So you don't have to do that. But there may be times like they might say check with Medicaid, state plan, which is just regular Medicaid, where you get in-home personal care services. So you might have to go try to get that. But if they say, no, we can't give them to you, then you go back to the county board and go, that's not available or effective. They might give you a little bit of services and that's not working. You may have to go back to the county board and go, that did not meet his needs. So it has to be available and it has to be something that meets his needs. We're seeing a lot of creative little things happening here. So those are kind of things we tell people, give us a call. We can kind of help you think about how you want to refute that. And you can always, anytime you're denied any kind of waiver or any kind of waiver service, the Medicaid service, you have a right to a state hearing. So you can go and challenge it in a state hearing. You don't want to just show up, though. You will have to show that they were wrong. They have to show they were right, and you have to kind of refute that. So it's important.
And the county can still come back and say no?
Can the county come back and say no, even though the state told them, a state hearing officer told them to do it? State hearing officers are not super great of saying you have to do it. What they like to do is send it back. You should rethink this in light of my brilliant language in this, decision. It happens, yes. They do sometimes come back and say no again. I've had some clients have to do it like 3 times. If the state hearing officer says you have to give them a waiver, they have to give a waiver. And so you can do a compliance thing and you can take it up to the next level of a state hearing. But they often don't do that. They often go, I think you should rethink this. And then the county board's like, I thought about it again. Nope. So, you may have to come back and do it again. We get a lot of those calls, and that you can call the state hearing bureau and go and ask for compliance hearing. Sometimes they'll say you should file state hearing on compliance. And I had one person that was for equipment. She had to do it like 3 or 4 times. We finally did get it. EPSCT did it. But you do have to kind of be persistent with those things. And it does frustrate people like crazy because, here's the thing. These hearings are done by the actual agency themselves. So it is a state hearing by someone neutral, but they're given an opportunity to fix their mistakes. So sometimes they don't fix them, and then there is a process to go to court and appeal something in court. You can do what's called administrative review before you go to court, and that's where the lawyers actually look at it. And I like that level because the state hearing are not lawyers usually. State hearing officers, they're usually people that know the rules and they apply the rules. But when you can get to the next level with the attorneys, then you sometimes have an opportunity to get some things done. This is where you bring up your EPSCT and health check.
So we are going to switch gears and kind of move over to the Q&A. I first wanted to see, Alicia, if there was anybody who had some questions from the chat, and then we'll alternate between in person and in the chat. I'm sorry that we didn't get to all the slides, but we knew that was going to happen. Yeah, Katie. A parent asks if the child has already received early intervention services. Have they already completed that first part of what's included in waiver services?
No. The answer is no. Okay, so the county board services are services through the county board. School district, also services. Early intervention, also services. Early intervention goes up to about 3. Let's go a little bit further, but mostly 3. So then the school district can pick that up at 3. But you still can go through the county board to get county board services. So if your child needs a lot of help and a lot of stuff in the home, then I would definitely recommend you go through the eligibility process for county board. Because it's long term too. They go through adulthood. So, it's always better if you get in and then they get to know the person and they're maybe less likely to take it away later. If the person's been getting services throughout their whole life. Not to say they don't do it, but generally. So, it depends on what your child needs. I mean, if that meets your child's needs, early intervention and school services, you're okay. But if it's not, and you have a child that has a lot of behaviors or a lot of things going on, and you feel like we need more help than we're getting, that's when I think you need to go and go through that process and really document as much as possible all the things that are going on. It's hard, but you need to do it because it is really important. Because, those services are really something that the child's going to need. After you're gone as a parent, they still may need services. Lots of these kids will need services as adults. So the earlier you can do it, I think the better. But you don't want to do it if you don't need it, because then they'll just throw it. They're going to be like, no, you don't need it. We do get a lot of calls from parents that have very small children, maybe 2 or 3. And not to say that you can't. You can get an IO waiver at birth, really, depending on circumstances. Very, very rare. Because they're going to want you to go through early intervention. They're going to want you to try all these other things before you can do that. And your child may grow out of a lot of these things if they get the good services. So it is very hard to get those kind of waivers for young children. The other thing we run into is that people are like, well, I need services. As a parent of a child with disability, it is still your responsibility to take care of your child. Same thing as any other parent. You can get waivers in your home, but you're going to have to show there's a big need. So above and beyond what anybody else has to do for their children. Just because they have a disability doesn't mean they get all the services in the home if you need them. So these are the times when you want to talk about, well, I'm one person. They get up in the middle of the night, they go outside, and I don't even know they're leaving, and lots of stuff happens. So, there are all these little factors to think about. So I wouldn't say you automatically have to get those services started, but I think if your child, you're sure they're going to need these services, And there are lots of sports you can get too. They do provide like respite and things that can be very helpful if you have a child with disabilities. So, and that's not waiver. That can be just county board. County boards provide some of those things. As they get older, they can do rent subsidies. They can do a lot of different things that can be really helpful to people. Of course, waivers are, if you really need more services than what a county board.
And then we get a question from parents a lot. Can you speak briefly to paid caregiving?
Oh, I hate those questions. I'm sorry.
I know.
Only
I'm
reason I hate
sorry.
them because they're so hard to answer. Generally speaking, I'll say this: parents generally can't get paid to be a provider for their children because you're already obligated to take care of your children. There are circumstances when some children need a whole bunch of help, and if there's no other services available, so we have parents that have kids that have a lot of medical issues, like it's 24/7 that they could die. Somebody has to be up 24/7 doing things like that. You can get paid for if in extraordinary circumstances. So there's this very limited thing that you can do if you have a waiver. Some parents become independent providers or they become an agency provider for agencies that provide in-home services, and sometimes they can get paid through an agency where they wouldn't necessarily be able to be paid as an independent provider. It's very complicated. I always hate to answer them because everyone wants to do that. I will tell you, do not quit your job so you can be a caregiver. I've done this now 20 some years. People lose their jobs because they're taking care of their kids. It is a real issue. It is. But the minute you say something like that to a county board, they are not going to do it. They are going to fight you to the death. So you cannot present anything. I need a waiver so that I can stay home and be with my kid. And it's true. It's not untrue.
Yeah.
But the minute you focus on what you need as a parent, they will not do it. It has to be, what does the child need? What are the child's needs? What is the level of the child need? Does a child need waiver services in order to be able to maintain health and safety in the community? And that's where parents get into a lot of trouble because I'm the only one that can take care of them. But then they go to school and the school does okay, I guess, whatever. It's very hard to make those arguments. Not saying you can't. Not saying parents can't get paid. Some of them can, but only under extraordinary circumstances, and especially if it's a minor child. Because you do have obligations as parents. Even sometimes we wish, why do we have to? It's very hard. I felt that way with my son. I had a lot of help, but in my home, but it was only because my child's needs required it, not because whatever. I did stay home with my son for 12 years to coordinate all these services, but that can't be the reason that you're asking for a waiver. And we do run into quite a bit where parents, and they're not wrong, they're absolutely correct. I hear you, it's true. I know that happens, but you cannot sell it that way. You cannot present it that way. It will shut down a county board immediately because they're very, very concerned about people taking advantage. It has to be about the child's needs. So we get tons of calls about it. They're hard to answer because I have no all the little facts. And also one other thing, if you have a waiver and you're providing more than 20% as a agency worker of the child's services, then they're going to put you on what's called shared living, and it's like a per diem. So it won't be an hourly rate anymore. It'll be a daily rate, a lot less. Medicaid is all about saving money, folks. That's their whole approach, as they should be. It's public fund. But that is how they think, and that is how they work. So shared living, people get very angry, but if you're going to provide, as someone that's living with the person, you're going to provide more than 20%, they are going to put you on shared living, and you're only going to get a per diem, which is fine if it works for you. But then you're not going to get all these other people in your house to help you either. So you have to really think about these things before you make these kinds of decisions.
Can you explain the differences between DD waivers and Medicaid waivers?
Okay, so DD waivers are Medicaid waivers. So they are. There are other waivers. There's something called an Ohio Home Care Waiver, and some children will get that waiver. It's mostly for children with significant health issues, so you have to have a different level of care. It's like a nursing facility level of care that you need skilled nursing, so you need to have nurses there for medical needs. You might need to have some other things, and they have pretty big requirements on keeping that. So a lot of people that have kids that have pretty significant medical needs will have a home care waiver, but at some point, unless the person just continues to have kind of significant medical issues, they may get thrown off of a home care waiver. And then you can go and apply for a DD waiver, but you're not going to get that level of nursing with the DD waiver because, as I mentioned, DD waivers, they pretty much try to delegate all nursing. You cannot delegate all nursing, but if your child does need nursing, that is a major battle all the time for people getting enough nursing. And it is, there's shortages. I mean, it's a very difficult issue, and we get tons of calls about it because it's very, very hard to get a lot of nursing. So it may be appropriate to have a different kind of waiver, a home care waiver, but it's only if your child has. And they have some of it's like defined of, I can't remember the language. I wish I would have brought it, but it's kind of crazy language. If you have unstable medical condition, but if you always have an unstable medical condition, then guess what? You're not unstable anymore. You're always like that, and people get thrown off. It's very frustrating for everyone. It's very hard. We get a lot of people that think they should go get those waivers and then they don't get them and they call us and we refer them to DD waivers. So, and with the DD waiver, you can get nursing through Medicaid straight, but you're going to have. So hopefully you'll get this PowerPoint.
Yes.
It lists every single service, but if you go to DODD, Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities website, you just put waivers in, they'll have you. That's where I got these from. I just stole them right from there. And it'll list all the services you can get on the waiver. Doesn't mean you're going to get them all, but you can get them. And there's quite a bit. I mean, it can be very, very helpful. But you won't necessarily know that. I will tell you, my son's had a waiver since he was 5. I didn't even know he was on a Medicaid waiver. No one ever told me that's what it was. They're like, do you need help? I'm like, yes, I do. Help me out. They gave it to him. When I come to do this work, I'm like, oh, this is a waiver. I gotcha. But I did not know because they don't tell you all of this. So you really have to do your homework a little bit, and you have to get on the website. But it will list every service, and we've got it on the slides here for each different waiver. They have a comparison chart for if you want to look at the other waivers, what their requirements are and what they provide. Ohio Medicaid has, they will have a list of all the different waivers they have. I can't remember. I think there's maybe 8 or 9 different ones. There's one for people with mental health issues. There's, the ones for elderly people. There's a lot of different ones, but mostly we focus at our office on DD.
How do you know if your child has a waiver if they're getting a lot of their services through their school?
Yeah, good question. How you will know you have a waiver, it will be on your child's all services plan or individual service plan. So that plan that you get when you hook up with the county board and they're like, hey, yeah, you're eligible, we'll give you services, we have a plan. Whatever services you're going to get are going to be on that ISP. It's a book, okay? But they will have all the services, how many hours you're going to get services, are you going to get, home cooked meals, or any of those services on a waiver will be on there. And then any services by the county board that's outside the waiver, because they do provide some stuff like, most county boards will provide respite, in-home respite or out-of-home respite. Most county boards have family resources. So anything that they're going to give you should be on that ISP. So if you don't have an ISP yet, and you may not, you might be right there getting ready to do that, then, it should be on there. And that's where you put it. And like I said, that's how they get paid. That's how everybody gets paid. So it's really important that everything you need on there, that is on there, it's really clear. And then you have to sign these things, or if you refuse service, you can refuse them. But if you say, I disagree with you, I'm not going to sign that, and we get a lot of parents do that, I never recommend that, because then you're just not going to get any services. It's much better to sign it, say you disagree, explain I agree with all this, except I disagree with this. Then you can go file a hearing on the part you disagree with, but you still get the services that you signed about. And so I would definitely not recommend you do that. And we've had people lose services that way because they're like, I don't agree, I'm a team member. You are, but they're gonna, if you don't sign it, then they don't have to pay for it and they don't have to do it because it's not agreed. And ISPs get done every year. So they don't necessarily reassess, but the team meets and says, hey, how's it going? Does he still need this? Does he still need that, or whatever? And then they make a new ISP. And then you can disagree again if you want, or agree, hopefully. I mean, I think most county boards are in this business to help people, but it is there are a lot of money issues, I mean, these county boards are really strapped because there's so many people now trying to get these and needing the services. So I think, you do sometimes have to work with the county boards. I mean, unless you're planning to move out of the county, I highly recommend you don't make them really angry at you, because then they're not going to give you something or make it a lot harder for you. So I've always tried, even with my own situation, we've had to have our disagreements over the years, but I try to work with them because, they're doing the best they can. You can go through the processes, but, try to work with them, because they can be a godsend to your child, and get what they need. And I say this having a 33-year-old man who we just had a couple bad years, and so these people kind of saved us, by working with them. So I highly recommend you do that. I know they can frustrate you, and I'm sure you frustrate them. And it's just like an IEP, you're going to have a little disagreement. It's never going to go perfectly smooth, but be professional. Put things in writing, document what you're asking for. And I always try to tell myself, be a professional. Just be a professional when you're doing this. You'll get much further than if you lay down on the floor and kick and scream. And we might feel like it, and I have felt like that as a parent. But you stop and think about it long term, because your child's going to be.
And we're going to hold off and see if anybody else in the room has a question.
Ask the question again. Someone works with a lot of kids that have vents and trachs, and have very significant nursing needs. How do we support that need? Yes, it's difficult. It is difficult. That would be one I would say would likely go through the Ohio home care waiver, if they can show that the child has an unstable medical condition. Although I will tell you, surprisingly, they will say that they don't, because they always have it. So it varies, but regardless, you have to go through these programs. So if you're going to try to get that waiver, you get it. You have to do documentation. It is very difficult to get nurses, the kind of nurses people need. I mean, these parents are amazing, to be honest. They pick up so much and do so much. I'm always in awe of them. And it's really awful for them. I mean, they are up in the middle of the night doing all these things just to make sure their children don't die in the middle of the night. And it's very, very frustrating, hard. I do encourage people, you can contact us. I will, unfortunately, I won't, but somebody will say, there's nursing shortages, but maybe try here and try there. Sometimes you have to get more than one agency. If you have a waiver, you don't have to just have one agency, and nobody likes that, but sometimes you've got to piece together services to get what your child needs. And you might have a little battle with the other agency or the county board, but you do not have to just pick one agency. You can have, you've got to meet the child's needs. If it's a child, you'd be saying EPSDT health check whenever you can, trying to make sure that this child gets what they need. It is very hard. The nursing stuff is very difficult because there's a lot of nurses, and part of it's Medicaid doesn't pay very much for nurses. I mean, nurses go to somewhere else to get paid a decent amount. They go here, come, and they get paid crap, to be honest. And so it's very hard. I mean, crap, not really, but not for the nursing world, yes. For all they do. And so, it is very difficult. And part of the problem with Medicaid is they kind of leave it up to the states to try to, and to CMS, which is over Medicaid and Medicare, to them to decide whether the state is doing a good job making sure all the services that are needed are available in all parts of the state. And do you have enough nurses? Can you get that in the rural areas? So it's not easy for a parent to challenge those kinds of issues, because courts have said, well, you don't get to do that. So there are things you can challenge, but those kind of systemic issues are very hard. And that's more kind of a legislature trying to do that. So we have worked at our office. We've actually helped get the higher rates for people, direct service providers. So we've tried to do some of that work around the side, but it's definitely still difficult. And then nursing's just always.
So big round of applause for Julie and Ginger.
No, for Ginger.
For Ginger.
Yes.